All right, so this is the demonstration of the SearchWorks knowledge panel experimentation that we've been doing in our instance of Blacklight here at Stanford called SearchWorks. So what I have here is a search result where I've faceted on a particular geographic region, which is one of the facets that we have here on our left-hand side. As you can see, there's a lot of different place names in here. We've then taken this information and we've basically dereferenced a lot of these things against who's on first. And we've been able to pull in who's on first IDs as well as Library of Congress IDs for each one of these regions. So we're pulling this map in from who's on first. We're able to get the hierarchy of this particular location in who's on first. Which allows us to then take the map and we can actually jump out to various versions of the hierarchy and then kind of back in through the map. So this will work with any place and go and travel up to the highest level of the hierarchy that they have in who's on first. As I mentioned, we're pulling in the Library of Congress identifier for these items. That is allowing us to go to Wikidata like we do with many, some of the other items that we'll be showing you in the demo today, and actually pulling some content in from Wikidata. In the case that I'm showing you here, this happens to be just a description here. So we're pulling this description in from Wikidata. So we have here a search results panel where we're kind of merging two different sources of data from both Wikidata and who's on first. And as you can see, we're actually have an invitation here indicating that this is open data and available to be edited by users. Another thing that I'd like to show is we've added another kind of search results panel, but this is an author panel. This one happens to be triggered based on faceting on an author. So we provide an author facet here on the left-hand side. So once I've faceted in on the author here on Beethoven, I'm pulling in a knowledge panel with content from Wikidata for Beethoven. So you can see we've gotten a description as well as a thumbnail. We also have a list here of notable works, which when I expand, we're actually able to pull in some HTML5 audio players for some of the open notable works that are in Wikidata. And I believe all the files are ones that are in WikiCommons, so all open audio files, no issues with copyright. And we're also listing the occupations here. So if this this person had multiple occupations, I believe this one does, then we should be listing multiple occupations here. Okay, so the other kind of flavor of knowledge panels that we've been adding here are on the record view itself. So you can see here, this is a record for Blade Runner 2049. So similarly, we're pulling in a thumbnail for this item, as well as a cast list from Wikidata, a list of derivative works, and narrative locations. So these are specific to title level records. So this is going for this specific title. We have an authority URI, and we're going and pulling this information from Wikidata. Similarly, for authors in records that we have authority URIs for, we've put a little toggle next to their name. So I could open up and I can see the information that Wikidata has on Harrison Ford. Pretty sparse, but here it is. And so this might be a good opportunity for potentially enhancing, because I think Harrison Ford may have a few notable works. And then similarly, when I click on Harrison Ford's name, so this isn't necessarily a faceted search, but this is searching for an author contributor search, but we've identified that this has come in from a known Wikidata entity and are able to identify that and pull the same knowledge panel data directly in the search results for this case. So that same information is available here. So that is kind of the different flavors of knowledge panels that we have. So some geo data where we're merging sources, an author and a title panel, and that same author panel data available contextually in search results. I will also mention, I think I faceted on a region to show the geo panel earlier, but that will also work, say, if you're clicking on a subject in a record view that happens to be a place name, the same thing will happen where it will go and it will pull that information up and show you the geo panel mixed with Wikidata. So I'm going to now hand it off to Chris to talk about some other experiments happening in our index.
So the work I've done in this work cycle is somewhat similar to the work Jesse just demonstrated. The big difference is the knowledge panel work is making live queries out to the Wikidata query endpoints and pulling data in dynamically. And I explored what it would mean if we indexed that data locally. And I ran into a number of challenges in that. So the UI is not as fleshed out as it could be, but there's a couple things to show here. The first is we're able to bring in the Wikidata identifiers into our SearchWorks records. And you can imagine then dereferencing this and pulling back even more data. We're indexing the data into this same SearchWorks index using LD path, which is a fairly simple language for traversing linked data endpoints and pulling out particular bits of data. We just chose a small number, 20 so, of different properties that may be interesting, including where people were educated, notable awards, and other identifiers out to FIOF and LCC. We pull that data into our search index, and this is a limited subset of them, but we can see some of that data reflected here. And because this data is in our search index, in addition to driving knowledge panels, we can do a couple of other interesting things. The first is we can add facets based on this data. So an example here is we're searching the subset of data that I'm using for my tests for authors or contributors who were educated at Stanford. And our MARC records have no notion of where these people were educated. The education is coming out of Wikidata itself. We can say Stanford, we can say Cornell. We can say Princeton and pull back different segments of this. And we can do this faceting on any of the different properties we're pulling out of Wikidata right now. So we could, for example, decide to facet on contributors who have won Nobel Prizes, or similarly works, if that information is recorded in Wikidata. There's a couple other interesting things you can start doing besides faceting and pulling the data into the results views, and that is actually populating a facet sidebar with this information as a way to get your user into that data. This work hasn't been poked through into the user interface yet, because there's a number of challenges. The most significant one is the way this data is presented in our Search API responses is radically different than other approaches, so it was kind of tabled. And I just want to mention one of the other challenges in this work, and that is in order to perform this indexing, we need to query the data endpoint. We happen to have a large number of resources with Wikidata references or authority references in them, pulling back hundreds of thousands of references. To do that indexing is relatively expensive in terms of time. Kind of trying to obey the fuzzy resource limits, resource usage limits that Wikidata publishes. It was looking like maybe a second a record or so, which for hundreds of thousands would be unacceptable. It would take forever. So I did some work looking into ways to make that faster, including hosting a Wikidata endpoint locally that we could throw as many queries as we want, as parallelized as we want. And my initial test looked very promising. It was tens, if not hundreds of times faster than the service Wikidata offered. The problem is their data sets are 8 billion triples, which means you have hundreds of gigabytes, if not terabytes, of information you need to process. And many of the linked data tools out there are not really set up for handling that. One of the libraries I had capped out at 2 billion some odd, 2 to the 32nd triples because of a limitation in the language it was implemented in. So working with this data is proving to be more of a challenge than one would hope. So that's that.
Great. Okay.
I also have something quick to show that's a little bit incomplete, but it takes another tack on the record view knowledge panel. So I'll just share that really quickly. So currently in SearchWorks, many of our records have this browse related items section, which is organized by shelf mark. So these are supposed to be books that if you were to find the physical item in our libraries would be physically nearby the book. So a different way to kind of explore related items would be, rather than a shelf axis, a time axis. So this uses data also from Wikidata to grab author names and their lifespans and works and related authors, and can render them in a zoomable timeline. So this is not hooked up into SearchWorks in any way, but Wikidata provides this, and we have queries that can give us some idea of not just the author and their lifespan and related works, but also related authors by the field of study field, and geography and other
Uh,
possibilities. So this is another thing that could be included in presentations to the broader community. That's it.
Great. Well, thank you. So I think that wraps up the demos for the work cycle that we've been on, and